Okay, Lama Surya Das, thank you so much for joining me. Always such an honor to connect. For starters, how are you doing? Where are you? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling fine, although I'm certainly feeling the troubled world and what's going on, especially in this country, with police brutality and shootings, and not to mention COVID emergency, economic downturn, and other worries that we have to deal with today.
Yeah, there's so much.
I'm not happy about the refugee and immigrant situation, and the administration using this time to cut down even more on sanctuary and refugee programs, make it harder for those disenfranchised people and so on. I'm very in tune with the refugee situation since I lived in Tibetan refugee camps for so long in the 70s and 80s and 90s in Asia. And I know there's 60 or 70 million refugees and homeless refugees in the world that are looking for somewhere to lay their head. And there will be more, I'm afraid, when the seas keep rising due to environmental changes, and there can be mass population movements. So we really have to work on the environment. Otherwise, we're going to face unprecedented problems, I'm sure. Besides that, I'm fine. This is like an enforced retreat, societal retreat the last few months, and I'm used to monasticism and long retreats, so I know what to do when I'm alone, and things have slowed down and quieted down, so that's good. On the other hand, I'd like to make more of a contribution to help people and provide solace and connection and some practical wisdom. I'm beaming and streaming for free on Sundays at 11 and Wednesday nights at 8. That's 8 Eastern Standard Time, New York time, 11 a.m. Sunday and 8 Wednesday. And I have a retreat, virtual retreat at the end of July. You can look at my websites and find these things. So join us. It's a good time to get together.
Beautiful.
And in place.
Great. Thank you. Let's dive straight in. And I think it'd be beautiful to, I mean, we've already begun, but a chant or meditation, contemplation, something to really help people, you know, to connect to a compassion, a strength that isn't bypassing what's going on. As we know, it's so seductive, so common to, you know, get into our practice and kind of bypass the shit going on and like ignore it. Or it's also easily just as seductive to get trapped in it and obsessed and just be watching the news constantly, just be stressing and worrying about it, which is understandable as well. So very often it's either or. It's either let's transcend it, go beyond it into an ultimate view, or a kind of transcendental bypassing, or the obsessing, getting stuck in the mind, stuck in that kind of fight, flight, freeze tendency. So I think it'd be nice to speak to that, because I think it's a pretty common predicament, that either or of extremes, especially right now.
Well, there's plenty going on,
yeah.
And we could talk about that. But one thing I want to say is, as I often say, I think Buddhism's great contribution is the middle way. Buddha said he didn't teach, you know, Buddhism. I mean, his followers created Buddhism. He taught what he called the middle way, beyond extremes, not all or nothing, always, never, black and white, overly simplistic thinking. And so I think that's always a good touchstone for me to remember about the either or, and the way our dualistic or bifurcating intellect likes to, you know, try to land on one side or the other with total certainty and security, which is an illusion. And things are impermanent also, so even if it's temporary, it's still not reliable in the long run, those kind of illusions. I've often been saying, and you know, I've written a blog about this, you can find it online, about being careful about becoming a news junkie, things may or may not be as important as they seem at the moment. You know, later in retrospect, you recall how upset you were, or the children were, and you know, it might just be about graduation or getting the right prom date or getting to the right college, which seems important at the moment. But you know, these things are very, very subjective or limited, relative, you know, in the bigger perspective. And so it's good to remember this too shall pass, and to pay attention and be responsible and practice self-care and safety and the protocols and all that. I don't have to talk about masks and distance, social distancing. Everybody hears that all day. But it isn't a good time for mindfulness to know where your hands are and your mask is and your feet are and what you're doing and who you're touching. And it's a good mindfulness practice, and be very present and alert and awakeful and not dozing at the wheel of one's life. So that's something positive that could come out of this. And also people could, you know, take the backward step a little during this enforced retreat or refuge in place time, as I call it, rather than sheltering in place, and find the refuge in this, in the port, you know, safe port in this storm, in these choppy waters, in these agitated and uncertain times. And go deeper, look inward, not narcissistically, not solipsistically, but look deeper, look inward, have more quality time with your family and loved ones, cultivate some more interiority and quietness and noble solitude, which is quite different than loneliness and alienation. Noble solitude, along with one's constant companion, your higher power, your inner power, however you think of it. And interiority and timeless wisdom are such endangered natural resources today. And we overlook them and ignore them at our peril, although they're available to us. And we would do well to cultivate them. I think that it's a good time to do this work, as well as whatever we can to contribute. I bow, I venerate, I pray for and embrace the frontline, brave frontline health workers and emergency people and all that, those people, which is a lot of people going into the face of danger every day and not hiding out and not quarantining and not always having the best PPE, protective gear, and other supplies for various reasons, economic, socio-political, class-wise, and for other reasons, which it would be good if we could redress those imbalances and injustices and inequalities. And especially for those who are putting themselves in harm's way for us all, selflessly. It's a good time to get together virtually, if not in person. In person, you can do with masks and social distancing, or in other ways, like seeing the grandchildren play in the backyard while you stay inside or in the porch. And other ways, FaceTime, Zoom, Skype, phone, letters, pictures, video, messages, you know, ways to get together in the spirit and somewhat in the flesh. Like I love FaceTiming and Skyping with the Bambinos in my family, my godchildren, my god-grandchildren, my grandnephews and nieces and so on. See them have their first walk, even though they're over in the other coast and things like that. And it's very heartening. So one has time for that these days, and it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to do. Also, I'm catching up on my resting and napping and self-care and healthy living, exercising, meditating, yoga, reading, and praying. And I want to encourage people to take advantage of those contemplative opportunities for contemplative sweetness, for refuge and in place, if you're interested, if it calls you. And of course, we don't want to make the spiritual bypass and go around these things or just try to transcend them and ignore them. We have to deal with them. We all have a part in this. No one can do it alone, but no one's exempt from participating. We're all in this together, interconnected, interdependent, interbeing. So those are a few things that I've been thinking about. It's funny, I asked one of my friends who lives in Vermont, we were in India together in the 70s at monasteries and ashrams and with the great gurus and etc. A good travel buddy, Chaitanya. And he said, he's an American from Boston. He lives in Vermont. He's retired. He said his life hasn't changed very much. I said, really? He says, you know, I still don't have a cell phone or a television, and I live alone. And mostly I do my arts and spiritual practices and talk to people on the phone or wave at them as I drive by or walk by. And I see a lot of animals living up in the woods. So everybody has their way of being. Of course, we're the lucky ones. We're the lucky ones. Even at the level of that we're educated white males, this is the lucky class in our side of the first world. We don't often get racially profiled or prejudiced against, although my people got strongly prejudiced against in the past, like in World War II and other times. But I'm not going to harp on that. I'm just saying they are us. Whoever's down now, you know, we were down once, and we'll be down again. And the challenge is when you're down, not to hate those who are up, and when you're up, not to forget that you're down and they are us. And when I see myself and others in me, who could I harm? Who could I exploit? Who could I take advantage of? So my heart breaks when I hear people are in COVID wards and dying without being able to see or hold the hand of anybody they know or love, or even hold the hand of a nurse or doctor. I felt like we spiritual leaders and clerics and chaplains and all could very well go to those wards and hold those people's hands and so on. But I haven't found a really safe place or way to do that yet. But it is heartbreaking.
Yeah, I want to speak to that a little bit, actually, because it's so prevalent right now, that heartbreaking situation of not being able to be with those dying due to the restrictions, not being able to, like the toll it's taking on the elderly. Of course, we've put these measures in place of social isolation, but the toll that's taking on the elderly. And I've seen that in my grandmother, who is 92, and you'd love her. She's groovy and strong and sassy and just a rocking Jewish woman, and just, yeah, amazing. And through this whole thing, we've been really diligent of not bringing the kids over and not getting close to her, kind of just doing the drive-by and waving hi. But it's taken its toll. It's definitely taken its toll. We've seen her become much frailer very, very quick. And yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I know that's going on a lot. Like we've tried to be good citizens, so to speak, of all this isolation and social distancing and whatnot. But the toll that's also taken, of course, we're lucky that we've been able to take it in its stride and look at it kind of like a retreat and slow down and do healthy things and quiet down. But for a lot of people, it's just amplified their depression, and domestic violence has gone through the roof, apparently, and shit like that, addiction. So, and I know people that even have a practice that have gone into old patterns of kind of self-destruction and depressive kind of patterns. And possibly some of those people are listening to this, and it'd be, I think, beautiful even just to speak to that kind of predicament of how loneliness can really break us down. Like we can either dive into it spiritually and really feel the beauty of loneliness, like the great aloneness, which of course is ideal, but it's challenging, you know, when the heart's breaking.
Sublime solitude is not the same as loneliness and loneliness.
Right. Yeah.
There's a difference. It's a different frame. It's a different.
So let's speak to that. Yeah.
How you can, you know, reframe it, or a chiropractic adjustment to your outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Like looking forward to noble silence and noble solitude and having some time off the grid and taking advantage of that. Mm-hmm. And people that have a practice, you know, the robe, the haircut doesn't make, you know, the words don't make the saint or the sage. So it's, you know, when you're sick, that's the time to take the medicine. So if you like doing yoga and prayers and meditating and you lose it when there's, a emergency, I mean, we have a global pandemic emergency now, so we can use that word in a crisis. That's the time to take refuge in something reliable, in your practice, within, in peace of mind, in moving from me to we, and thinking about others, not just oneself, which defocuses the feelings of dissatisfaction or loneliness away from oneself. It's a good time to practice loving kindness, self-compassion and self-metta, loving kindness on oneself, wishing oneself well, praying, wishing, affirming. All these things are in my books, certainly.
Yes. So I've got right here.
Practice these things.
I love to, I mean, every page is gold in your books. I mean, we revisit them again and again. It's so beautiful how enlightened and mystical they are, yet how practical, how practical. And also your latest podcast, your latest talk on integrating the practice, where the rubber meets the road. And I think I just flipped it open this morning, your book, Awakening the Buddha Within. I just flipped it open randomly. That's often what I do, and just kind of meditate on a practice. And the Tonglen meditation seems to be a good one right now, which it could be nice if you feel inspired to run through that for people, like with all this police brutality and corruption and murdering. And of course, I've been angry, I've been sad, and it's natural to feel angry and sad. But then it feels like what's possible is to kind of convert that anger and sadness into like a compassionate kind of anger. Would you agree?
Yes.
That?
Well, people have a lot of mixed feelings about the difficult emotions like anger, but I say anger is just an energy. It's not yet devolved into rage, hatred, violence, vendettas, bitterness, resentment. So you may feel angry and there may be something wrong, but how you respond to it makes all the difference, not just blindly reacting in kind. So mindful anger management is very necessary. Tonglen, giving and taking, sending and receiving. Tonglen in Tibetan, part of attitude transformation or mind training practices in Mahayana Buddhism, to reverse the tendency to cling to what we want and to push away what we don't want, and to gain equanimity, and again, equalizing self and other, and moving from me to we. We practice riding the breath, and it's a kind of advanced practice because it's challenging. Most people want to breathe out the negativity and inhale the light. So counterintuitively, this practice helps one lean into the darkness and embrace the darkness and the wholeness of oneself, light and dark, all the wrathful and peaceful deities. We call it in the Shitra, the 100 deity mandala of Tibet, of Vajrayana Diamond Buddhism. So we embrace the dark and face fear. So I'm going to instruct it. I'm going to do it myself because I don't want to instruct you, people to listen who are listening to do this. They can think about it or look it up. It's easy to look up Tonglen.
Sure.
And practice first, resting in emptiness, in openness, in the infinite, groundless and boundless pure being. It says in the text in the 59 mind training slogans of Atisha that are the basis, root text for this, Tonglen and Lojong, or attitude transformation practice. Rest in the unborn emptiness or luminosity. So it's like the clear light of Dharmakaya or Shunyata, the shining void, the luminous openness, the infinite. And from that, one starts riding the breath, breathing out and breathing in, following the breath, concentrating on the breath. Quote, riding the breath as if your attention or your mind is riding the breath. The breath is a steed, the mind, the attention is the rider, riding the steed. Out and in, and letting it dissolve into the unborn, undying Dharmakaya emptiness. That's very important, so you don't accumulate stuff in yourself, even though this is just a creative imagination visualization practice, and you're not going to get sick by wishing to take on the sickness of others. But some people might take it literally and talk themselves into being sick. So we have to start with this openness and awareness, this resting in the unborn, dreamlike Dharma nature, the Dharmakaya. Groundless and boundless, bottomless, infinite, the unconditioned, the luminous void, in which everything arises and is resolved, where it returns to the ultimate sphere, the bigger picture, the totality, the luminous, unborn and unborn Dharmakaya, the Buddha mind. And then wishing, praying, may all the sufferings of others come upon me with the in-breath, and I'm hoovering up all the darkness in the world and come upon me and dissolve into me. And may they be freed of all their burdens and sickness and sufferings. And may they have all my wellness and vitality and youth and health and immunity. May all the COVID virus in the world come upon me and be dissolved into me, into the empty, open, luminous, true nature, the infinite void, my heart. And may all beings be freed from the pandemic. And may all the AIDS virus be dissolved into me. You see why this is an advanced practice, children. Don't just do it at home without some preparations. And may the AIDS virus come into me and be dissolved into the empty, luminous voidness of my own true nature. And may all those afflicted with it be freed of it and have all of my T cells and white blood cells and youthful, vigorous vitality and good karma. And may all those who are impoverished or hungry or thirsty, may their sufferings and their scarcity and their poverty come upon me and dissolve into the empty, luminous Buddha heart mind. And may they have all my wealth and possibilities and resources and advantages. Breathing in all the darkness in the world, breathing out all the light, hoovering up all the caca and the schmutz, all the shit, turning the shit into manure on the fields of Bodhi. May I take on the burdens of others, and may they be lightened and enlightened. Inhaling the dark and breathing out the light, equalizing self and other, sending and receiving, giving and taking, riding the breath. Like an air conditioner, purifying, transforming, transmuting, liberating everything in the empty, open, luminous, shunyata, jnana, vajra, the infinite, open, wisdom, awareness, void. My loving awareness, our true heart, our best self. May all the fears and anxiety of beings come upon me and be dissolved into my own. And may they have all my security and strength and resilience, patience and forbearance. May all beings be cured of all that afflicts them outwardly, physically, innerly, mentally, emotionally, energetically, and most subtly at the spiritual and psychic and visible levels. May their burdens and afflictions be dissolved into my empty, open, luminous, infinite, divine heart, divine mind. And may they have all my inner light, truth, wisdom, selfless love, and abundant generosity. As the saint said, learn about me. Let me take your burden upon me. And come with me in this way, in the truth, the love, and the light. And at the end, We chant Om Mani Padme Hum and cultivate loving kindness, compassion, and joy equal to all the four boundless, the four Brahma Viharas, the four divine virtues: compassion, loving kindness, joy, and equanimity or impartiality. Or just wish well to the world, like in loving kindness practice, metta, benevolence. May you all be happy, may you all be peaceful, may you all be liberated. May all beings with whom we are inseparably interconnected and who want and need the same as we do. May all be free from harm, danger, and fear. May there be peace and harmony in this world, and an end to war, injustice, inequality, poverty, and oppression, pandemics, famines, floods. And may we all together complete this beautiful spiritual journey, walking each other home. Imaho, wonderful. Yes. So that's Tonglen practice. If you're interested, you can look it up. You can read about it in my books and others. I guess you could ask Lama Google. Lama Google knows all.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
Hard to learn these things from books. It's good to have a little instruction and then some ask you questions and clarify the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you that was so beautiful. Thank you. And on one level, it feels like there's nothing left to talk about, you know, if we really go deep into that.
I know let me say then, yes, there's nothing left to talk about, but like if you can practice, you know, you can practice this with people who are sick or just in the abstract on the whole pandemic situation. But don't think you're gonna, you know, you heal them physically. What you're gonna heal is your inner conflicts and egotism and your tendency to grasp and push away attachment, greed, hatred, and delusion, or attachment, aversion, and ignorance.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up actually.
Like it can help the whole world.
As we lean in and really get real with that, get honest and vulnerable and really pay attention, I can see in myself where I distract myself, where I close the heart, like kind of conveniently close the heart from that depth of compassion. It's scary. And that initial, like really leaning into it, it's fucking uncomfortable. And I even feel like an increase in my body temperature. Even though I've done this a lot of times now, still, when I really get into it, even like my palms start to sweat, it feels like uncomfortable. But what I experienced just then is like that kind of metaphor of turning poison into nectar, that kind of release from the divide and where I armor into a real bliss. And that's also what I felt when my dad first got rushed into ICU, like the initial like mourning and despair and like the just wanting to be with him physically, like doing a similar practice of like leaning into the grief and like just crying through the intensity. Even then there was a release into a kind of a bliss, a mystical love, which feels very available in that practice if we are willing to keep like penetrating the discomfort that'll come up, because it will keep coming up, right? Like even for very experienced practitioners, even if they think they got it, stuff very well may come up, and just to keep persevering, right? Keep breathing, keep going, keep going into whatever you're experiencing, because it's all not just our own individual stuff. We're really opening ourselves up to the collective, aren't we?
Yes. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, Buddhism is not a self-help project, and there's no self, and it can't be helped. It's not a self-improvement project. So moving from me to we and defocusing on ourselves and our narcissistic or self-preoccupied concerns helps relieve the pressure and the burden. Also, a lot of anxiety is from worrying about yourself and what's going to happen to you. And it's amazing when something's happening to somebody else, especially if, you know, a dependent, a child, a sick elder, somebody who's weaker than you, somebody who may depend on you. Then You forget about that and you leap into action, and you're much more one with yourself, and it's healing. That's why, we say, like, giving is healing. Giving a gift brings double return to the recipient and to the giver. It's beautiful. And again, cultivating noble silence and noble solitude these days, you can go deeper and wisen up and be more self-aware and open your heart and mind and learn to be at one with things as they are, even as we try to improve the situation. Acceptance goes a long way to changing and transforming things in the end. First, we have to accept the diagnosis, come to some clear-cut, wise diagnosis. We'll get a second opinion, but then you have to accept the diagnosis before you start the cure, the appropriate cure. So acceptance doesn't just imply necessarily complacence or indifference. And seeing things as they are, clearing our vision, as I always say, meditation and introspection and contemplative practices. It brings contemplative sweetness, yes. It helps us relax. It helps us be healthier. It lowers our blood pressure. It releases the happy hormones. It does a lot. But it also helps us enlighten up, gain wisdom, discernment, wise awareness. When I become clearer, everything becomes clearer. That's how it works. It's good for one and all. So this is a good time for that. And cultivating noble silence, noble solitude, etc., is different than just can't find any friends and being alone. Like practicing chastity as a monk or nun, practicing brahmacharya, chastity as a yogi or a sannyasi, is different than just not getting any and looking for it all the time. It has a whole different intention and a different karmic outflow. So intentional spiritual practices, some might even call them austerities, like solitude and silence, but there are harsher austerities, or fasting. There are harsher austerities. So again, fasting is different just than not finding any food and starving and feeling bad about it. Fasting has a purpose. So, and a lot of purificatory bits and pieces to it. So I think it's important today to, yes, pay attention, but not be a news junkie and get overly caught up in it and be manipulated by the media and the advertisers and the, politicians with all their machinations trying to push you and pull one way or another to stay in power, get your vote, whatever. And on the other hand, not to be an ostrich, put your head in the sand and hope the storm will blow over. So the middle way. And we can't do this alone. It's very important to do this together and pull together. Otherwise, we get pulled apart. There's a lot of pressure these days. There's a lot seemingly new stuff. Although one way, as it says in the Bible, is nothing new under the sun, still there seem to be new surprising forms and permutations, and not just technology. Like different standards, the different standards we have today for facts, for truth, for journalism, for accountability. I mean, these are different times. These are different times. I remember Robert F. Kennedy, who was assassinated, a senator, when I think he was starting to run for president. The martyr JFK's brother. RFK said, politics is a noble, honorable profession. And he and his whole family thought of it as public service. Who could say that today without people snickering?
Yeah.
So who can young people or anybody look up to today? What authority figures or professions still hold character and integrity and, unimpeachable integrity? It's very hard to say. So we have to become the changes we want to see in the world. As Mahatma Gandhi said, we have to lead. We have to, be part of the solution. Otherwise, we're part of the problem, as we used to say in the 60s. In the peace movement.
Totally. So what are your views of all the, of course, the peaceful protesting, which is beautiful, but then the riots and the looting? Like, I've kind of, I was initially kind of swaying in my perception of it, but I've kind of come to like, I can see how, like, of course there are some people that have just taken advantage of the shitty situation, and it's an opportunity to loot. But the amount of, like you were just saying, like, who do we look to? There's not many authority figures that are honorable and really showing a good example of how to just be a good human being. So it's so understandable why people are outraged and burning shit up and going mad. I've come to an empathy and understanding from, like, prior to that, like, what the fuck, is this actually helping? But to like, I've like, of course that's happening. Like, what are your views in more of the destruction going on and the looting and whatnot?
Well, it reminds me of the race riots of the 50s and 60s in America, and the peaceful anti-war demonstrations and marches in the 60s and 70s about the Vietnam War, secret bombings of Cambodia and Laos and other things. In 1968, barricades in Paris, because that was my youthful radical politics time. And Martin Luther King and Gandhi and the Dalai Lama and other people inspired us. Also, Judeo-Christian leaders inspired that movement and marched in front. Of course, that was the age of assassination. Martin Luther King, Ralph Abernathy of the NCAAP and the Colored People's Association and others were assassinated, as well as the Kennedys. It was a terrible time. Mm-hmm. But at that time, too, the criminal element took advantage with the looting and carrying out TVs and other things from stores. You know, that's not what we were interested in, nor did we suddenly get the idea to be interested in it. We were kind of horrified and didn't know what to do except stay out of the way so we wouldn't get harmed. We were in no position to stop them. And it was terrifying. Of course, I got hit with tear gas and other people got worse. My 19-year-old friend got shot and killed at Kent State University on her campus by Ohio National Guard in 1971 when 4 students were killed there at Ohio State. There's a song about it by Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, both Kent State, 4 dead at Kent State, I guess. It was a terrible time, and it's happening again. And I'm afraid our fearless leader, our earless feeder, keeps feeding and emboldening the extreme and radical and violent and xenophobic and racist elements of our society and even abroad. So that's not helping. And I don't know what we can do about that, except vote for people who will do differently. But it's a dark time. It's a dark time. And we have to face it and manage it together. Voting is one way, writing our representatives, signing petitions, marching, getting out the vote, but cleaning up our own act, rooting out the hatred and prejudice in our own hearts is very important. I want to stand up for that. We all have inherent implicit prejudices and sides of ourselves that are not so salutary or beautiful and healthy. We can root out and not react in kind. I mean, it's horrifying what we see on the media now with police shooting black men in the back who were running away and could easily be tackled or lassoed or cut off at the pass, and shooting them twice, not just once, and shooting them in the back, not just the ass or the legs. But I'm no expert. I'm no expert on armaments, emergency protocols, what do they call it? You know, rules of engagement, stun guns, how dangerous they are or aren't. All I'm saying is it looked pretty bad. And after seeing George Floyd sort of tortured and kneed on his neck to death for 9 whole goddamn minutes, while he was saying, "I can't breathe," and "Mama," you know, by a veteran cop while his other cop friends stood around, it's horrifying. No wonder they're being charged with murder, not just losing their jobs. I don't know about Minnesota disbanding its police department. What do I know about police departments in cities? but it's pretty unusual. New times calls for new methods, and people are trying to think out the box and make a difference. We have to do something. Otherwise, we could have revolution. The wealthy class and the poor class have gotten much further apart, and this is in this country, and this has always become a cause for revolution and civil unrest. I'm concerned about what's going to happen with the election, especially if it's close. So I feel called upon to become a wise spiritual elder and mentor, and not perfect, but impeccable, have integrity, be a mensch, as my father would say, a real person, a decent citizen, not just a man, and contribute where I can. Contribute where I can, and donate and vote and pray and get people together to do spiritual practice and dialogue and discuss, not just teach. Listen. Yeah. It's a very important time to listen and to learn and to grow and to, restrain and reframe and reflect. And anything else that starts with an R may be good. I don't know. I don't want to exaggerate. Remember, remindfulness. But we can't take ourselves too seriously, Stuart. Well, life ain't much fun. That's also an important part of my message always.
Yes.
As the Germans and the Austrians say, it's kind of a joke, but two different personalities of those countries. It's a stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
The Germans would say, it's serious, but it's not hopeless. And we could all agree, understand that. Austrians would say, Yodelehu, it's hopeless, but it ain't serious.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
That was your
Siri. Thinks I was talking to Siri.
I seem to be having trouble hearing you. Sorry about that.
Everybody's got their 2 cents in, isn't it?
That's perfect.
I know. The robots are taking over, as I always say, but we're robots too. Who programmed us? That's what I want to know.
Well, I know we've spoken about it in our previous episode together of your transition from, who was it that was calling you Serious Dust to...
my old girlfriend in the 70s.
Right.
Called me Serious Dust, but I'm much younger now and lighter.
And there's a common movement I want to just bring attention to I'm seeing it in a lot of conversations around Dharma and the practice these days, in that a lot of people are like kakaring the notion of enlightenment, saying and the whole notion of enlightenment is a scam. It's absolute bullshit. Let's just do this more neo-tantric approach. So I really appreciate your teachings on enlightenment and your admission to like, it's not about this old model of perfectionism. So it'd be good to speak about that a bit, because you are this beautiful leader and teacher and role model of the Dharma. And it's been really refreshing, your take on enlightenment, which doesn't have to be so fucking serious after all. And this old model of this perfectionism, this unattainable perfectionism. I mean, no wonder why, similar to the word God, how that kind of got chucked out, and now the word enlightenment, a similar thing. Could we speak to that a little bit and this kind of trap of perfectionism as well?
Well, most of us as adults are quite aware of the limits and the downsides of perfectionism. And we could even quote the old saw, nobody's perfect except God. I wouldn't say, we don't know enough about God to be sure about that. So, nobody's perfect, and nobody needs to be perfect, and everything's perfect enough as it is, and it could use a little tweaking. So we try to do a little tweaking, and if we can't make it, seem better, which again, a lot of this is appearances, it's so subjective, it seems a little better, then if we can't, we can still live with it. And we know this too will pass. This is temporary. This COVID time, this recession, this presidential administration or whatever. I'm concerned about what happens in the next few years and what happens with the Supreme Court, what happens at the local laws and justices level too. We all have to look at that. But generally, enlightenment is not what we think it is, and it's not going to answer all those questions. Buddha got enlightened, and India still, was a mess for many years. Of course, it was better and more civilized and more nonviolent, and more, did I say yet more civilized? And an example is, the end of the caste system, but it took a few thousand years for the horrific caste system. It's like it's taken us until now, if we have gotten rid of it, to get rid of slavery, if we have gotten rid of it. And if you think we've gotten rid of it in this country, I'm not sure, but look around the world and you'll find out all kinds of slavery still going on. Human trafficking, child trafficking, sex slavery, economic slavery, and other things. So nothing is perfect, but everything is good enough as it is for now. And then we work on it, polishing the mirror, trying to become better people and contribute to a better world through whatever way we can. Words like God, Buddha, enlightenment, truth, nirvana, heaven, these are placeholders, Stuart, for things most of us don't understand. I would say all of us don't understand, but I don't go in for the all or nothing hyperbole kind of arguments and melodrama. Mm-hmm. No doubt there are great sage and saintly beings. Maybe it's not even the famous ones that we could think of. Maybe they're unknown. They're humble, or they're working behind the scenes, or something. I think that just like people tell us we only use 10% of our brain cells or something, let me speculate, we're only using 12% of our spiritual light. So maybe that's enough. It's a lot. But maybe it could be more, or if not more in quantity, in quality. And we could grow innerly in the cardinal virtues that all the religions talk about. All religions have a common moral base. No one wants to be killed, harmed, ripped off, or their loved ones to be killed, harmed, or ripped off, or lied to, or exploited. So there's a common moral base to all, but different systems have different skillful methods for deliverance, or to get you there, whatever you call it. Mm-hmm. Enlightenment is not what we think it is, and it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's just a nice story or metaphor. So I'd like to talk about being there while getting there, being fully here, present and accounted for while getting there. Every step of the way, not waiting, not postponing, not believing or reading. It takes 10 or 100 lifetimes of schlepping to get, like spiritual trench warfare, schlepping to enlightenment. No, it's not that hard. Of course, it takes a concerted effort and diligence, continuity, resilience, perseverance, effort, sincerity, authenticity. It does. But you didn't hear me say what color your clothes have to be, what you're eating, the lifestyle or hair has to be like. We're talking about virtues that can be cultivated in ourselves, in each other, in our children. It should be part of higher education, not just vocational education. Colleges become like vocational education, not really higher education. I'm all for higher education, wisdom for life education. Increasing our discernment and awareness and being more conscious rather than unconscious at the steering wheel of our lives. Then we'll have less so-called accidents. As we're more conscious, we're not dozing off. And we understand what's connected to what. That the steering wheel turns the wheels. Not wishing, not shouting, and not turning the rearview mirror. That doesn't turn the wheels. Some people go through life twisting and turning things that aren't connected to anything that makes a difference. Maybe we do too. Or, seeking for love in all the wrong places. Seeking for happiness in all the wrong places, in bottles and pills and get-rich-quick schemes. No lottery ticket has ever made anybody happy for very long. In fact, it usually brings more problems. I mean, may you win one, Stuart. May I win one. But that's not the point. I mean, I have to laugh while I'm saying this because I never bought a lottery ticket in my life. I probably should just to support education or something, but I don't know. On the other hand, I feel like I've won the enlightenment lottery. I'm just so grateful and fortunate. And I got started early. I had an intact family and good parents and good teachers and, you know, good karma and health and enough middle class support to go out on my own in the world when I graduated college when I was 20 and go to Europe and India. You know, I know everybody in the world doesn't have all these advantages, so I really want to try to help lift them all up in my maroon Lama shawl.
Yeah.
Into the light of a better life and a harmonious and, you know, not my life, but their true life, each and all of them.
Yeah, which brings me to something I think would be really valuable to touch upon. Of a lot of white folks right now are feeling a kind of paralyzed feeling of guilt and shame for this systemic racism that's really the insanity of it really is being revealed on another level right now, as we've been speaking about. A lot of people are feeling again kind of paralyzed with the guilt of being in more of a privileged position. So can we speak to effective ways to really be honest with that feeling? It's kind of almost a valid feeling, but once the guilt and shame becomes paralyzing, I mean, it's not really useful. It just becomes this kind of poison that disables us from being effective at all. So ways in which we can lean into even that really yuck feeling of guilt and shame in regards to this this issue of racism that I also want to really get discerning with and see where I'm still unconscious in that regard.
Well, I've only been down under twice. I'm no expert, but I know that the Aborigines, if that's what they're still called, were racistly discriminated against, etc. And, you know, as I was saying before, some of us may be up now, but we were down before, we might be down again. So probably most of us could relate to that if we look into our lineage and history. I felt also some kind of like upper middle class guilt when I realized that my life hadn't changed that much since February, March, April, and I was kind of living in the country in retreat. Not really in retreat. I was living with my doctor friends and their extended family who we kept distance from, but, you know, very much a nexus of activity rather than now, like I'm living alone again in my, you know, Lama's Hermitage place outside Boston. But, and occasionally seeing people and doing things online. But I was feeling guilty that there's so much suffering and I wasn't suffering that much. And I was thinking of it, it's like kind of like survivor's guilt that I know some Jews had from the Holocaust, or people who survived accidents or fires or other things, sometimes called survivor's guilt. And there are other names for it, what you're talking about. But feeling it and giving into it and indulging it, you know, is a bunch of steps. So it's not what happens to one, but what one makes of it that makes all the difference. So the winds are blowing of karma, of individual, collective, species, and, you know, local and global karma. Like if an asteroid hits the Earth and destroys the sunlight and the race dies, you can't say that's because Stuart or Surya were nasty, were naughty. It's a collective karma of all the species. Like when the dinosaurs got wiped out, it wasn't because one dino stole somebody else's lunch money or, you know, carcass prey. No. So there's a lot of karmic forces at work. But how much I go down that path of guilt and feeling bad and can't do anything and hopeless and it's too big and I'm no one and no agency, you know, and then you get to despair and giving up and hopelessness and even depression. That's a pathology. That's not just a sad feeling. Happy feelings go up and down. That's normal, and they're supposed to, like ripples on the stream of consciousness and emotion and feeling and being a whole person. But then I really looked into it and thought, I can see this is like survivors. I feel guilt. I'm feeling guilty that others are suffering a lot more, and my life hasn't fallen apart that much yet, although I'm getting older and things are going and rusting out. But and other aspects, and my parents are gone and things like that. My wife died a year and a half ago, but it's not the end of the world. It's much more tragic when the young ones die before the older ones. So there's a difference between sad and tragic. And this is where discernment and wisdom and awareness comes in. And we can cultivate that and not just be more intelligent, IQ, but more EQ and existential intelligence and spiritual intelligence and psychic intelligence, spatial intelligence, and relational mindfulness, relational intelligence. This helps a lot. So I've been thinking about that and praying on it and doing Tonglen. If you feel guilty you have too much, then give some away, or practice Tonglen, practice giving it all away and taking it all in what you don't want. It really reverses your tendency to cling to what you think you want and resist what you think you don't want, which is just another form of clinging and attachment. Resistances. So those are a few of my thoughts. These are tough times. I encourage people to get together, however you can, to reach out, to ask for help with those you trust. Don't be afraid of being seen as weak or vulnerable. We all have weaknesses and vulnerabilities. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to be strong man. We don't have to be, like perfect mother, biblical woman. We're fine the way we are. We will have our place. We're all flowers in God's garden, blooming in different speeds in different ways. It's a beautiful garden, that's all. And we got to take care of this garden. We're the garden, but we're also the gardener. That's the rub. We have to do this without adult supervision now that we're the adults. That's the rub. There's no excuse. We can't blame anybody else. We elected the people who are running things. That's the rub. In America, we live in a divided country. It ain't that simple. That's the rub. Rub means irritation. Irritation means heat, pain, too much rubbing, you get sores, you get wounds. That's the rub. You take care of it, or lubricate it, or change something. And not just incremental change. This is the time for exponential leaps. We need to think out of the box, not just either or. And the pendulum swing back and forth, like from conservative to liberal. But find the third way, a fourth way, a great way, a way that suits us going forward. And global way. We can't hide behind oceans, Maginot Lines, Berlin Walls, the Great Wall of China, meaningless today, except as a tourist artifact and historical attraction. One world, all interdependent, interwoven, interconnected, interbeing. So how do we do this together? Stay alive and live our true life, not imitate somebody else's life or trying to please somebody else all the time. I think these are great timeless questions. And when the going gets tough, as we used to say in football practice, the tough get going. This is the time. This is the time. There's a great virtue in adversity. You can gain a lot through loss. The Tibetan saying is illness is the broom that sweeps away negative karma and obscurations. Because it makes us more vulnerable, more open. There's room for other things to come in. Tibetan, another saying is the enemy, the crisis, the illness could be our greatest teacher. It gives us great lessons in humility, like we're not in control and in charge.
Thank you.
And immortality and impermanence and other things.
I think this is a great place to wrap up with a chant. Lama,
okay.
What do you think?
Very good. Thank you. Always go out singing and praying and happy.
Yeah.
This is one of Dalai Lama's favorite prayers. He often prays this in public. Jancha Samcho Kripoche Make Panam Ke Gyochi Kepa Nyampa Bepa Yon Kone Kandu Pelwasho. Where the lamp of enlightenment has not yet been lit, may it be ignited. And where it has been lit, may it be fanned into flame, may it blaze up and illumine and warm and guide those who are lost in the darkness and heal, illumine the entire universe. And may all beings everywhere with whom we are inseparably interconnected and want and need the same as we do. May all be awakened, liberated, healed, fulfilled, and free. May there be peace and harmony in this world, and an end to war, injustice, inequality, poverty, oppression, pandemics, droughts, famines, floods. And may we all together complete the spiritual journey. One family, one sangha, one satsang, one beloved community, one mandala, one samaya, one. 1 + 1 = oneness. Let's do this together. Thank you. And I bow to the Buddha in your seat. Don't overlook her.
Thank you so much, Lama Surya Das. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank
It's
you.
my pleasure. Could you announce or show or whatever about my virtual retreats and things that Kathleen sent to you or
For
something?
sure. So please mention where people can find that.
Yes. So if you would like, if you look at my websites, surya.org, www.surya.org, or dzogchen.org, www.dzogchen.org, dzogchen, dzogchen.org. You'll see my teaching schedule. And these days, we've had to postpone all our in-person retreats and workshops and classes and local sitting groups. So we're doing online, virtual, free, Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Boston time, and Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Boston time for 1 hour of chanting, talking, guided meditation, Q&A.
Wonderful.
And the last week of July, I have a virtual retreat. You can see it on the web. You can sign up from anywhere. It's going to be 3 days, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, virtual retreat. So
Beautiful.
Come along.
We will. We will.
Join in the fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're
Be
welcome.
well.
Steve. Thanks for what you're doing. And to all of you down under and in cyberspace.
All right. Much love. Thank you so much.
Love.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Yes. Good
Stay
night.
healthy. Be well.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right. Till next time. Bye.